You're listening to The Deep End, a Penn Plastic Surgery podcast. Today, Dr. Azori sits down with Dr. Marara, a transformative figure in reconstructive microsurgery and translational research. Dr. Marara serves as Chief of Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. He's the current president of the American Society for Reconstructive Microsurgery and president-elect of the Plastic Surgery Foundation. With multiple NIH grants and groundbreaking research, Dr. Marara has built a distinguished career combining exceptional patient care with pioneering scientific discovery. As we approach the upcoming ASRM meeting in Hawaii, we'll dive into his keys to success as a surgeon leader and his passion for research. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Deep End podcast. This is the reason why you drove down to Philadelphia, is for this podcast. Truthfully, you came as a visiting professor, and we're extremely happy to have you here. But we actually just got this Amazon package that you actually have to drink out of, not now, but you have to drink out of when you go back to New York. This is a mug.
Nice. That's
Deep
a big
End mug.
shot glass.
Yeah, it's a big shot glass. And you have to take it back with you to New York.
I will. I promise.
But thanks for coming today. Before we start with questions, and this is purely conversational, and we've had a great lineup so far of a lot of leaders in plastic surgery, psychology, Warren School, stuff like that, and it's been a lot of fun just getting to know people and getting to talk to people. Me having known you, I thought you'd be a great person to chat with, but I'm no longer your fellow.
All right.
So I get to ask whatever questions I want.
This is hard.
We talked a little bit about it last night. Growing up, just to rewind a little bit, if I were to talk on script about you and introduce you to people that don't know you, I would talk about, how many NIH grants you have, what a great surgeon you are, you're president of ASRM, PSF, and I'd go on and on and on. If I talked off script about you to introduce you to a bunch of people that don't know you who are going to be listening, I'd say you're such a great person, and you're a good friend and great mentor, and universally everyone thinks that about you, and you're a lot of fun to be around, which is not... It's not the norm, I think, in leadership roles, and you and I have had this conversation before. But so clearly, there's something that happened in your early years, perhaps that kind of molded how you became a normal person later down the road. But when we were talking last night, you mentioned that in high school and before that, your interest was sports. You weren't even thinking medicine at the time.
No,
so can you talk about that?
It's interesting. I actually have always wanted to be a doctor. I don't know why. I was the first person in my family, in this side of the family, to go to college. So we're not like a scholarly family. But even when I was as early,
Even
as
your
4,
siblings and everybody.
Yeah. Well, I was the middle child. My older brother did not go to college. But even as early as me being 4 years old, I wanted to go. I knew I wanted to be a doctor.
Uh-huh.
I don't know why.
Why?
I don't know. I always wanted to be.
Grey's Anatomy? No, that wasn't on back then.
God, that was Grey's Anatomy wasn't even born then. I think I'm very much like my father, and I've always been curious. I didn't start speaking until I was 4.
Yeah, I remember you saying that. Yeah.
But when I did start, I didn't shut up. And my most common question was how and why. I would ask my father, what is this? Why, how? I wanted to know how everything worked and why everything was like that. And so I think I knew I wanted to be a scientist, but I wanted to have a reason to be a scientist. I didn't want to just do, experimental physics or something like that. So I wanted to have, patient contact was great. So I always wanted to do that, and I think that's where it came from.
What'd your dad do?
My dad was a self-taught engineer. He was he essentially built his own company manufacturing foam products and latex and things like that in Iran.
Uh-huh. So even in high school, you knew you wanted to be a doctor?
Yeah, I always wanted to be a doctor.
Uh-huh. So the sports that you played rugby in high school?
No, I played football.
Football.
Wrestling, and track.
What was your favorite sport?
I think probably wrestling.
Why is that?
Wrestling is an interesting sport because it's a team sport, but also an individual sport, and so you get a little bit of both. So your team score is important, but you individually are one-on-one against someone. So it's one of those few sports that are like that. It's also a very mentally tough sport. It's hard. There's a lot of hardship involved. I think back then you had to sort of lose weight to make a certain weight class, and that was difficult, and practice was difficult, and so I think it was just good for learning, for building confidence, for building discipline.
Yeah, definitely.
And also leadership roles, because you definitely have to be a leader on the team to get the team to perform like they should.
Yeah. Do you think that did your father or mother or anybody have any influence on supporting you to do medicine at some point?
Oh yeah, I mean my father was hugely supportive. He paid for my college and was even though it was difficult, he definitely was proud of me to go to medical school and college and things like that. So I think he was very, very supportive. The education was very important to him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then where'd you go to undergrad?
I went to BU.
And then what got you from there to medical school?
A car. Well, I mean, I was a biology major, and I did research in college too. I wrote a thesis.
Because you talked about this a little bit last night. You didn't enjoy studying. I'll put it that way, right?
I mean, I think, well, the problem was that I didn't really learn how to study until I was in college.
Gotcha.
And it's a tough place to learn how to study because
you
don't really know. When I was in high school, we weren't at a particularly challenging high school, and so I didn't really study much, and I don't think I learned very good habits. So I didn't really know what I was doing. The other thing that was an issue for me was that although I was able to speak English colloquially, writing English was definitely still a second language for me. I came here when I was 10, and so rules of grammar, creative writing and things like that were very difficult, and I did not do great in those sort of classes like English 101 or whatever. And so that was definitely hard and took time to learn. But I liked the sciences, and after the first year when we sort of got rid of the requirements, it was all science after that.
Did you ever think at that point, clearly you were thinking about medicine at some point, did you ever think you were going to be a scientist in addition to being a surgeon?
It's interesting. Yeah, I did. I actually did 2 years of research when I was, during college, when I was in college, working with one of my biology teachers.
You took a 2-year break?
No, I did it while I was a student. And I was there both summers and things like that.
And that was optional. You didn't have to do it.
Oh yeah, it was totally optional. I think we had to pay for it because it was.
Oh gosh.
For research credit or something like that. But yeah, it was optional. But I did that, and that was fun.
Fun.
It was fun. I liked it. Yeah.
Yeah. It shows you like the type of personality you have to think that summer research is fun, but it's great. I agree. I think research is fun at this point. In college, I definitely might not have thought research was fun, but clearly that's why you're so successful now.
Yeah, and the research we did was with rats, which I do not like. I mean, I hope there's not a lot of rats watching this, but but rats are like they're difficult animals, and we didn't use albino rats. We use Norway rats, which are definitely very aggressive. And
They're very
aggressive.
Fun. I know. I worked in Julia Terzis' lab in medical school, and one of my assignments was to inject the rats with FK506. And it would have nightmares about going to these cages, and it's a room by yourself, and avoiding getting bitten. Every day, yeah.
And they would know you're coming.
Yeah. And they bite. They would try to bite.
Yeah, they try to bite.
So then med school, and so you wanted to be a surgeon, even in medical school.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you went to NYU.
Columbia.
But NYU for plastic surgery.
Yeah.
What was probably the most influential part of your plastic surgery training, you think?
Well, I think the most influential part was that I really wasn't planning on being a plastic surgeon. I was planning on being a cardiac surgeon. But I didn't.
You're the second person to say that. Dr. Levin said that right before you.
Yeah, I didn't really like cardiac surgery. Well, I didn't like the cardiac surgeons and the lifestyle of the cardiac surgeon. So I think, back then, cardiac surgery was every other night call. You were not expected to sleep when you were on call. There was no call room, actually, so there was no place to sleep, even if you were able to sleep. And you worked the next day till 7 or 8 p.m. So it was 36 hours on, 12 hours off. It was very, very painful. And I did 10 months of that in my first 3 years.
This was at NYU?
NYU. So it was very difficult. And then, I just didn't really like I just didn't think the surgeons were very collegial to each other. It was always very antagonistic, and it just wasn't my thing. And maybe this was just an NYU thing, I don't know, but it definitely was not my group. You have to find I think in life you need to find your group, your people, and then like where you fit in. And I did not fit in to cardiac.
Yeah.
So then I was going to do vascular, and I didn't really like that either. I thought that we weren't really helping these people. It was just not very, helpful, and I think a lot of amputations and wound infections and things that were out of my control as a surgeon. And so as a surgeon, you would do a perfectly good operation, but then it still failed.
Yeah.
And I didn't like that. I just didn't like that random.
Yeah, I agree.
Issue. And then I was sort of lost at that point because I didn't know what I was going to do. And somehow or another, I ended up doing a rotation on hand at Bellevue. And I found my people. Those were, actually Roy Hahn was one of my fellows.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So he was the hand fellow, and John Schreiber was the plastics fellow at Bellevue, but plastics and hand are together. And Howie was also there, and it was great.
Yeah, that's
Howard
really cool.
Langstein.
Yeah. NYU's always been regarded as an exceptional plastic surgery training program. I think it's right behind Penn in terms of, I'm just kidding, but it's truly regarded as a phenomenal program, especially during the Joe McCarthy, decades. What do you think helped you get in there? Clearly you were exceptional. You had to be.
Well, remember, at that point I had really done nothing to get into plastic surgery. So now I'm starting my third year residency, and other than that 1 month sort of exposure, I didn't really have anything. And I made an appointment, went to see Dr.
So you did general surgery not knowing you were going to do plastic surgery, right?
Yeah, I was categorical general surgery.
Gotcha.
So then I made an appointment and went and met with Dr. McCarthy, and he said, well, why don't you come into the lab for a year? I said fine, and I took off after my third year, and that same year I was lucky enough that Mike Longacre came to NYU.
Yes, that's right.
And so I started my lab year in July, Mike came in September, and Dr. McCarthy said, well, why don't you help him set up his lab, because he needs someone to sort of on the ground to do that, and it would be good for you anyway. And so Mike and I took a lab that was that basically just had benches, nothing else, and we bought PCR machines and hoods and all the stuff you need in the lab, and
it was fun.
It was fun. No, it was actually great. Like, Mike is an amazing mentor. I think out of all my mentors, he's probably the biggest mentor that I've had.
That's crazy.
But he has just infectious, positive attitude, and just a big thinker, and anyway, it was great because he taught me a lot, just sort of leadership qualities on how to get people to do things you want them to do, how to motivate people. And then I just learned a lot of basic science stuff, just stuff, how to design an experiment, and what's a good control, and what's a bad control, and what's scientific rigor, and things like that.
Yeah.
And so that was great. We wrote 2 grants together, both of them were funded, both R1, so that was fantastic. And so then 1 year became 2, and 2 became 3.
Wow.
Yeah, and then that was that.
You had 3 years in the lab.
3 years in the lab, and then after that, I just matched the plastic surgery and went to plastic surgery after that.
Which was an additional 3 years.
2.
2 years, okay. Oh, that's right. that's so cool to even just hear about.
Yeah.
You know, that you start that lab and with somebody who's so he's the definition of science in plastic surgery,
Yeah.
and so are you. But Nature publications and everything else. So I feel like having that influence so early in your career is so helpful.
Yeah, I was lucky.
And then how was it training with Joe McCarthy?
I didn't really get a lot of exposure to Dr. McCarthy, actually.
Yeah.
At that time, he was sort of slowing down. So,
Oh, really?
and I learned very early on, I hope he's not listening, that I didn't really like craniofacial surgery.
Yeah.
I just thought it was too much, or too orthopedic.
Why'd you like micro?
I love blood vessels. I like, I just...
Vascular,
I like
cardiac.
Vascular,
Yeah.
I like vascular, and I like being the surgeon,
Yeah.
like being the person they call
Yeah.
when they need someone that they can't fix or whatever.
Yeah.
No one does that with craniofacial, for example.
Yeah.
But I like that aspect of it.
Yeah, I think you talking about it makes me realize, plastic surgery is a lot of fun, especially being a fellow with you guys at MSK, the teamwork, but also co-surgeoning, it's a lot of fun. And thinking about cardiac and vascular and how you're almost isolated and everything you're saying, it's very important. I think that's one of the reasons why I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So then you went to UCLA.
Yeah.
How was that year?
It was great. I think that was the most formative year of my life professionally, maybe other than my first year as an attending. I think at UCLA I learned that doing a free flap is not launching a space shuttle. It's just a tummy tuck and 2 blood vessels that you connect, so it's not that complicated. And so that made me realize that free flaps can be done routinely. That it's not something that I need to stress about, that I need to sort of spend 18 hours doing, and 30% take back rate. You can do them well. You can do them quickly. Patients do very well, it's just another case.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was the most important aspect of UCLA. I also got lucky in that UCLA has UCLA Harbor, which is
Yes.
their
Yep.
county hospital, and so I did a bunch of cases there as sort of the attending, so to speak, with just me and a resident, which was hard.
Yeah.
You do a case with Andy DeLeo and it feels and looks so easy, and
Yeah.
just everything is so smooth, and then you go and do a case yourself and you're suffering, you just don't know, and you don't know why, But it makes you realize what you don't know. It makes you go back and say, all right, well, how did he set up the blood vessels so it didn't have a pool of blood around them?
Yeah.
And that was good. It was very helpful.
Well, that's how I felt when I left you guys from fellowship. Coming back here as an attending, it's a rude awakening, and that you talk about microsurgery and it being kind of easy if you think about it that way. These days, when you have a flap, let's say the next day or later in the week, do you ever still get nervous? You seem so calm in the operating room. Do you ever think about it or get nervous?
Not really.
I always wonder about that.
Yeah. Honestly, and I don't think I probably should not say this on the air, but I don't really think about it at all. I just show up.
Yeah.
In fact, if I know your name as a patient, it's probably not a good thing. But no, I never think about it. Like, it's not something, unless it's a case that I really need to sort of think creatively about how to do it. But most cases, as you get older as an attending, you have learned muscle memory, and so you have brain memory because you've been in situations like this before, and you thought about option A, B, C, and D, and you can come up with those options in 2 seconds, as opposed to before where you had to think about it. So you've learned that, and you can just very quickly evaluate a problem and come up with 4 alternatives, and then decide which one's the best.
Mm-hmm.
And if that alternative doesn't work, then you still have a backup. So I think that actually is the hardest part of being an attending. It takes the longest time because you can't teach that. That experience you can't teach. Experience is living through the pain. Unfortunately, I think you need to do that. It's like
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
It's like lifting weights. You can't read a book about lifting weights. You can't read a book about playing golf. You need to actually go and do that to build those muscles, and then you have that knowledge.
Yeah, sometimes I think about whatever it is in life, things that I've prepared for, as much as I've prepared, sometimes you just have to start it, and preparation it's good to prepare, but preparation really happens once you start, as soon as you start. Did you ever along the line, so you thought maybe you were thinking medicine your whole life, and then definitely surgeon, scientist, did you ever think to yourself, I want to lead a program in academics, I want to be in academics, I want to be a leader in academic surgery?
I don't think I ever really thought of it that way. I've kind of always been, had leadership stuff. I tend to be a little aggressive, not aggressive, but maybe outspoken. I speak my mind. So I like helping people succeed, and the best way to do that is to be a academic leader in a big group.
Yeah.
Because then you can really then you can put your stamp on that particular place. And then your legacy becomes the people you train. Your legacy is not the papers you write or whatever. No one's going to remember that. Your legacy is who you leave behind. Your kids, essentially your academic children. And so I think that was the motivating factor.
Yeah, and so who do you think helped you the most when you transitioned to MSK, like becoming an attending and things like that?
I think Joe Disa was very helpful, and Peter, in his way, was very helpful. A lot of it was sort of self-taught. At that time, MSK was different. We only had 3 attendings, and
that's crazy.
We were rarely ever, both of us, all 3 of us, or even 2 of us, at the same place at the same time. So many times we were sort of on your own. So I think that was a challenge. Some of my head and neck referral colleagues were helpful, and definitely were influential. Like Dennis Krause, for example, was a head and neck surgeon. Is a head and neck surgeon. He was at MSK and was a senior surgeon. He was maybe 10 years ahead of me, and he and I immediately struck a friendship. And my first year, I did 50 free flaps with Dennis.
Oh my gosh!
So that was amazing. Mark Bilski is a neurosurgeon. He taught me a lot about wounds in the back and things like that. Valerie Ruch, thoracic surgeon, who taught me how to raise an omentum flap, and so she was very sort of helpful and instrumental. I think all those colleagues that I work with, Pat Borgen, a breast surgeon, who taught me a lot about mastectomy and reconstruction, and just a great guy. So I think all of those folks, and I'm sure I'm leaving people out, and I hate it, but all those folks had a very big impact on me.
Yeah. So that's kind of the surgery side, but I mentioned this morning when I asked you a question that to an audience that doesn't know you, it sounds like you never operate, because you do so much basic science, and you do your science and your research really, really well, mentorship and everything else. So how on top of all of that have you had time to do your research, and what advice you have for others who want NIH funding, basic science involvement, et cetera?
I think you have to commit the time to it. So I think you need at least a day in the week.
That's what you have.
Yeah. The minimum. That's only for research, because otherwise it's very hard to switch gears in a day. So even if you have clinic in the morning and the afternoon free, the temptation's always there for you to leave at 3 and go home and whatever. So I think you really need to have a full day, and Peter actually really pushed me to do that, and I thank him for that, because I was sort of reluctant to do that. Fridays was a pretty big OR day for me for many years, and Peter said, listen, just stop, because it's not helping you, and I want you to concentrate on the lab. So I think having Fridays off was hard, because you'd established all those relationships and people expected you to be there to do the reconstruction. Mm-hmm. You're like, no, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be there. But it was critical, So I think having the time is helpful, and obviously having a boss that's supportive is helpful.
What about grant writing? Because that's hard. Intimidating.
Yeah, grant writing's hard. I think I took many grant writing courses. I wrote hundreds of grants. My grant funding rate, was abysmal initially, and you have to have a thick skin and not take it personally, because it's not personal, it's just business. Grant writing is very different than paper writing. It's a completely different animal. a paper, you're just telling someone what you did. You don't really care if they like it or not, because who cares? They just put down the article, and that's fine. A grant, you're trying to convince someone to pay you to do what you want to do, which is a completely different thing. And so it took me a long time how to figure out how to write grants. I still probably can learn more.
Was it one of those things, you took the grant courses, but was it one of those things that you actually had to start doing to realize how to get better at it, like get the feedback and stuff?
Yeah, no question. I think you need to have the humility to understand that your grant can always be better. You have to get that feedback from people who are honest with you and
Mm-hmm.
tell you that, and actually read the grant and really tell you, like what they think. I hate it when I send something to someone and they send it back with a couple of words and say it was great or whatever. I much prefer getting something back that's highlighted in red and just all kinds of X's and arrows and whatever on it.
Mm-hmm.
That's much more meaningful. And any of the fellows who've written papers with me have probably gotten those papers back from me, that way.
Yeah.
I think that's how you learn, So I think, you just need to, get help.
Yeah, and I think it was either you or Di Matteo who once told me that even if your mentor when it comes to research and science is outside of the world of surgery, that's okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes you want somebody who's in a completely different specialty to help guide you for grant writing and things like that.
We're not prepared to do research. When you compare us to PhDs, they've done essentially they've done a residency in research, right? So
Mhm.
they get a master's degree, which takes 2 or 3 years, and a PhD, which takes 3 to 5 years. So they've done a residency in research. All that time when I was drawing blood and transporting patients to the ICU at Bellevue, those guys were learning on how to design experiments and write grants and write papers and things like that.
Mhm.
So we're not trained like them,
Mhm.
and so you need to invest the time to learn what they know, because otherwise you cannot compete with them.
Yeah.
They know a lot more than you do, just not even at a scientific level, but at a basic level.
Mhm.
So I think you need to, that takes time. You cannot go from an intern to, someone doing free flaps, easily. Or it takes time. You have to learn how to do that. And likewise with the lab, you need to write and make mistakes, and have someone tell you you're an idiot, and start all over again, and admit when you're wrong, and don't give up something just because an experiment didn't work. Many times when your hypothesis was wrong, that's when you learn the most.
Mhm.
So I think you have to be nimble and pliable. You can't get too rigid with things. You also have to be ready for luck to hit you. If something comes along, you need to be able to recognize that it came along, because otherwise you'll miss it.
Yeah. When do you do all your grant writing? Like on your day off, weekends, nights?
I did it all over the place. I mean, I think you do get better.
Probably
at it.
because you loved it, right?
No, I don't think I ever loved it, but I had to do it. You do get better at it. So it used to take me 3 months solid to write a grant. Basically that's all I did. And now I can probably write it in a month or 6 weeks or something like that. A smaller grant I can probably write faster than that. But you need to set aside time. Most importantly, you need to finish it before the grant is due, way before the grant is due.
You told me that
so you
last
can send it
night.
to people to review. When you're first writing grants, finish it 2 months before,
Mhm.
even if it means delaying a study section, and then send it to friends. Because first of all, you want to make sure that what you're saying makes sense. You're just saying it correctly, so that some reasonable, rational person can read it. And for that reason, you can give it to anyone. They don't need to be a scientist. Do you understand what this paragraph means? And if they say no, they're not stupid. You're a bad writer. And just admit that. So
Do you still give it to others to read now when you do your grants? Or?
Yeah, I think I give it to my co-investigators.
Mhm.
And we have a full-time editor who's a phenomenal, person, and she's excellent. So she's helped me a lot. My co-investigators and things like that.
Yeah. How did it come about that you became chief at MSK?
I think Peter was sort of getting tired of the role, and he stepped aside, and there was a big search, and I think I was lucky enough to come down with it. I think it was partially it was being at the right place at the right time. I think that was important. I think being a good soldier and a good citizen definitely helped. You need to, you need to be a nice person. You can't, if you're a jerk, you can be the most qualified guy, but there'll be someone on that search committee who won't like you, who you harmed at some point, or
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
wronged at some point, who's going to get it your way.
Yeah.
And you don't know who that's going to be. And I'm not saying be nice because you want something back, but it doesn't cost you anything.
Yeah, I know. Those are the kind of things that you can't. You think you can actually teach people that? It's tough. I feel like if you're a jerk, if you're born a jerk, I don't know.
I don't agree with that 100%. I think that there's professional coaching that's helpful.
Yeah.
I think a lot of bad behavior is anxiety.
Yeah, that's true.
Projected externally, and many people get anxious in surgery, and it's understandable.
Yeah.
But I think I'm not confident in treating that, and so I think getting folks, professional people who can coach them into channeling that behavior into more productive things is very helpful, and it's helped me, but it certainly helps.
That's true. Yeah.
Things.
Yeah. And to think back to MSK when you first came, 3 attendings, but it also still had the rich history, Hidalgo, Cordero, and Marara, and now you built a group that has how many faculty?
I think we're 13 now.
13, and even an international presence, 5 or 6 fellows. What is
6.
it? 6 fellows, 2 rotating residents from Columbia and Sinai. Tons of people are visiting you guys. You must be so proud of the group that you built. And not only is it like exceptional surgeons and researchers, but just really good people and really fun people. What do you think has been your proudest thing about your time at MSK?
I think just helping the program grow. I think we were stuck in a little bit of a rut. We were a little too proud of ourselves. We were a little too insulated and falling behind times and sort of playing catch up and being late adopters as opposed to early adopters. And I think that's not a great thing for an academic center. You need to be an early adopter, or at least leading the way. I'm not saying that you need to jump on every fad, but if something comes along that sounds reasonable, then you need to think about it. And design good scientific studies to study. So I think that is something I'm proud of. I think I'm very proud of, and this was sort of there, but I'm proud of the team we have, the collegiality.
Yes.
And I think how everyone gets along. I think that's hard to do, but I think we have a group that's special in that sense. The co-surgeon model, I think, is
yes,
is
absolutely.
a great thing because not a lot of other places have it, but I think other places are now starting to do it.
Yeah.
So I'm proud of that.
I think the special part about the co-surgeon model is it has this residents and medical students almost perceive it as hindering their education. But when I experienced it as MSK as a fellow, I feel like it really improves your education on all levels because first off, it's almost like a calmer atmosphere for everybody. There's 2 attendings you can learn from. There's in these big cases, there's tons and tons of stuff to do.
Yeah.
And that really opened my eyes to the co-surgeon model. Actually, I don't think it actually hinders education. I actually really do think it improves education, probably improves patient care. There's been studies on this.
Yeah.
But it's certainly the few cases that I've done here have been so much more enjoyable when you're operating with a friend.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think.
And the longevity of doing it. You can't do it your whole life if you do it alone.
No, I think when things go wrong, you need a friend to be around, and it's a very big load off your shoulders.
Yeah.
And I think the residents and the fellows actually get more out of it because the attendings are much less anxious. Because we know that if you guys get in trouble, not that ever happens, but if you guys ever get in trouble, we can get you out.
Yeah.
So it was actually great for our fellowship. I think that changed our fellowship a lot.
Yeah.
Our fellowship was not particularly doing well at matching before that, but now we match very high quality fellows, and I think that was a big part of it.
Yeah, in fact, you have people rotating with you as if you're a residency program.
Yeah.
Back to when you had sub-Is probably.
Yeah,
Who
we
are
have
rotating.
international fellows now, which which are great because I think they bring a different flavor to the place.
Yeah.
Oftentimes they tend to be older and more mature, and they've had different experiences, which is good. And I think that diversity and the cultural and sort of training diversity is helpful for a program. It's
Yeah.
good for cultivating new ideas, and I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, I had Edwin and Jack,
Yeah.
two fantastic co-fellows. They're both going to be at
That's good.
ASRM.
Yeah.
Do you have, now that we've talked about all that stuff, do you have any regrets? Like, I know hindsight's 20/20, but do you ever look back in your life, like one or two things where you're like, I wish I had done this differently?
I mean, I wish I'd spend more time with my family. I think that's
You say that, but you seem like such a family guy. I see pictures. You always celebrate your kids' birthdays.
Yeah, but I didn't really see them much during the week.
Yeah.
I think when they were in their formative years, I think it was unusual for me to be home before they were, before they were in bed.
Really?
And so I think like I see people who have a set family dinner time or things like that, and I'm a little envious of that. Growing up, we had Friday night was sacrosanct, and it was at my grandmother's house and Shabbat dinner, and that's it. You need to be there. It doesn't, doesn't matter if you have
That's
plans
nice.
or whatever. And
Yeah.
so, it was always that, and that was great. And I didn't have that, and I wish I did.
Yeah.
And I think that Friday night, getting together, unplugging, the family being together, and just hanging out and just talking and whatever, was amazing. And I wish I had done that, and I didn't do that.
Yeah. Well, it seems like Dr. Levin this morning also talked about that, and being home and actually listening to your family, listening to your wife, and making time for it. Because as surgeons, we're go 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 go, but I wonder how much of it is the New York way of life. Like, New York days are just longer, operative days are longer, then you drive home longer.
I think
Yeah.
You can make excuses all the time.
Yeah.
You can but we make time to write grants, and we make time to write papers, and
That's
we make
true.
time to do whatever. And I think unfortunately some of these things at the time seem optional, but looking back 25 years, I wish I'd done it differently.
It's tough though too, because when I was talking this morning with Dr. Levin, times were way different. Like, I know we almost say like they're optional, but just hearing everyone talk, like, surgery was your life. It was. That's just how the time was.
Yeah.
Yeah. And your mentors operated around the clock. They were always on call, whatever, even as a resident and things like that. So times were different, and we were kind of a victim, not me, but a victim of the times in a way.
I think to a certain extent it's true. I think
Yeah. It's
uh,
not like you had friends probably who were going home and having dinner. I don't know, maybe you did.
I think the advent of microsurgery and advances in reconstructive surgery had a part to do with that. So, let's say in the 1970s you are working at Sloan Kettering, and I think you'd get called for a head and neck reconstruction once or twice a week, and you can schedule those on a regular business day and not necessarily be there till midnight on a Friday.
Yeah.
But because we were sort of a victim of our own success, right? Because our surgery is needed for other people to be able to do their thing and to help their patients, then we're sort of a prisoner to that. And so if a patient has cancer and the day they can have surgery is a Friday, and you happen to cover Friday, you're going to be working Friday. And unfortunately, lots and lots of cancer cases. There's never a shortage of those, unfortunately. And so then quickly every Friday you have is booked up. And then the next day you're tired, or you need to come in and ground or whatever, and so it adds up. And I think as I said, I think we're just a victim of our own success.
Yeah.
The field of plastic surgery has expanded. The reconstructive armamentarium that we have is very big. You cannot run a major hospital or cancer center without good plastic surgery. You just can't. And there's never enough of us. I always say that plastic surgeons are apex predators, because we're the last consultation. And if you have too many plastic surgeons around, you just can't support them. And so you need we need a a fine balance between having enough and having and being short. It's hard to have too many. So when you have that situation, then everyone ends up being busy, and then you end up missing Fridays and whatever.
No, it's true. Well, it's good because now I feel like you're passing that forward to your trainees and your mentees like me, and helping us to have a better balance. So we appreciate that. Two other questions that we typically end with is somebody like you who seems like you're so busy with work, but you also do stuff outside of work. What's kind of your out of work routine? Like, how much sleep do you get and things like that? Do you read at night, work out?
I always read at night.
What do you read?
Fiction.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I always have three. My wife makes fun of me, but I always have three books running at the same time. So I have a book on my phone, I have a book in my car, and I have a book at my bedside. So I'm always reading three books at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And I always read for 30 minutes or so before bed because I just can't turn it off otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
Sleep, I've tried to get better with sleep, but I sleep maybe 5 to 7 hours a night,
Mm-hmm.
5 to 6 hours a night. I have this illness where I just wake up. I'm up at 5.
That's great.
And that's it. Well, it's great and not great because I think if I look at my sleep score, it's not so great.
Yeah.
But I'm up, and if I'm up, I'm going to get up and do something. So sleep is not so great, but it's never really been, I
Mhm.
guess, a limiting factor.
Mhm.
And then as far as doing stuff out of work,
You work out with Noah?
I can't because he's too strong now, unfortunately. I like learning new things. Like I like learning about things I don't know, how computers work, machine learning, and I took all kinds of courses over the years in business and art. And,
Yeah, I'm surprised you haven't gotten a degree. You seem like somebody who would love like an MBA or something like that.
Yeah, and I sort of thought about that, but I never really had the time, and I'm glad I didn't because
Yeah.
I think it would have hurt my family life even more.
Yeah.
And I just didn't have the bandwidth to do that.
Yeah.
Surgery and patients and lab and
Mhm.
admin stuff and whatever, and an MBA. I just didn't have time. It would have been great. I would have liked to have an MBA because I think I would have learned a lot.
Yeah.
But just never really had time.
And then what's your favorite surgical instrument? I think I know what you're gonna say, but what is it?
Bipolar.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yours or Diane's?
Oh,
I'm just kidding.
Do you even need to ask that question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. You're president of ASRM this year. It's in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Super exciting. What are you most excited about, or as the president of the society this year?
I think maybe not excited, but anxious is my presidential speech. I think those speeches are always hard.
Are you sending it to people?
No, those speeches are always hard because they're personal and they're important. I think as a leader, it's important to give a speech that's meaningful, and so I think me giving a speech about lymphedema, for example, is not meaningful because
Mhm.
it doesn't.
Yeah, don't do
impact
that.
anybody. Yeah, I will not do that. Or talking about whatever. So I think it has to be something that's meaningful, and I think it has to be something that is different from what I usually do. And those things are hard because you have to think about it a lot. So I think that's the thing that I'm most anxious about.
And it can't make you too emotional. It has to be kind of like the right balance.
Well, I mean, I think that it's hard not to be emotional sometimes, because there are things that in your life that are important and are gone or whatever, and
Yeah.
there are folks that you need to acknowledge and who played a huge part in your life and they're no longer around, and those things are hard to talk
Yeah.
about in a setting like that because it just sort of lends itself to emotional whatever because you're already charged up because you're talking in front of 2,000 people, and
Mhm.
so you're sort of already maxed out on the adrenaline, and then add to that serotonin and dopamine and whatever else is going around up there, and that's a bad mix.
Yeah. But are you still playing a role in Best Case, Best Save?
I am not.
Oh, really?
I am
Who's
not.
taking your role?
I actually
Do you
don't
know?
know. I spoke to Mike Zinn about it, and I decided that I think it would be very presidential if I was
That's true.
on that panel. So
I don't think anything's presidential about that.
No,
that.
no. So I respectfully declined.
Okay. Maybe back at it next year?
I don't know. I think it's time for a
Pass the
younger
baton.
generation. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I've done it for a few years, and I think it's nice to hear from other people. And
Yeah.
the best case, best save is I think it's the best part of the.
It's the best part.
Yeah, I think it's the best part, and I think it's nice to give other people a shot.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay, awesome.
only if they're funny.
Yeah, that's true. Well, thanks.
All right.
Yeah, that was fun. Thank you.